listen to these people, Ricky. You're a winner. You got the gift. Always remember, if you ain't first, you're last.
If you ain't first, you're last.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another video with Swaggle. And in this video, we're going to talk about second and third printings because there's a lot of books out there that, come up week to week that get really, really hot in the market. And when those books do well, that are key issues, sometimes they do those second and third printings. And the question is, should we as comic book buyers and speculators be, picking up those second and third prints? Now, let me get one thing clear. I'm not going to have the discussion in this video with regards to, should we value second and third printings? I know there's a lot of people out there in the community that feel like second and third printings shouldn't have any value whatsoever, but that's not really what we're going to talk about in this video here today. What I'm going to focus on is what the market tends to do with second and third printings and how they, price them after the fact. So this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at some comparables in the market, and specifically, we're going to see if we can make any takeaways because there's some interesting books that are coming out, in the next couple weeks, specifically that of Black Panther #3, first appearance of Tosin, who has his first cover on that second printing. Also, there's the Timeless 1 Miss Minutes books that came out just this week for New Comic Book Day. So that one is interesting too. So I want to look at some comparables that are out there in the market and see if we can kind of make, some determination or figure out trends with what the market does with the prices for second prints. But before I get into the video for today, if you guys could drop me a like or a comment or subscribe if you're enjoying the content, help support the channel, doing those things, I would appreciate it. But let us get into this video here today. A few weeks ago, we had the Timeless #1 book that came out. There was a variant cover that featured Miss Minutes on it. Of course, Miss Minutes made her appearance in the Loki show, and the week that this book came out, it was a very, very hot book in the market. We'll flash forward to this week right here, and we have the Timeless book, which is the second print of this thing, and there's actually a 1 in 50 variant for it, the Ramos printing, and this one right here is another version of this cover, except that it is black and white. So this is something I kind of wanted to take a look at and kind of see if hey, is it worth picking up books like this and chasing them on the market? What can we expect for the numbers to be, after the fact, say like a year from now? Like where will they eventually settle in the market? Additionally, the book we have to kind of talk about is Black Panther #3. There's a second printing of this one eventually coming out, and this one is actually going to be the first cover appearance of the character of Tosin. Of course, Black Panther #3, cover A, went off in the market, and then the 1 in 25 really took off in the market. I made videos about that one, but neither of those books featured Tosin on the cover. And then here in the second printing that we're going to be getting, I think sometime in March, this is going to be the cover of it, and it's a really, really cool, and it'll be interesting to think about, if you're someone out there who wants to spec on Tosin, what's really the book that you should be pursuing, and how will these numbers really start to shake out in the market? So the first book that I did really wanted to kind of focus on with you guys here is the first appearance, or what would be the first cameo appearance of Ms. Marvel. So Ms. Marvel had her first cameo appearance in one of the Captain Marvel books, but it was like such a small thing that we don't need to talk about it. But she actually made her second cameo appearance, much akin to sort of how Venom makes his cameo appearance in ASM 299 in this book right here, Captain Marvel #17. And this is one of those books that actually ended up getting a second print. And one of the interesting things about this one getting its second print is that on the second print, they actually put Ms. Marvel on it. So the second printing of this cover actually featured the character, even though the interior story of this book still featured that, very, very small cameo situation of the character. So this one I think is really, really interesting to analyze as far as like the values of where it sits in the market. And then eventually Ms. Marvel would make her first full appearance in Marvel #1 #1 from 2014. This is the book right here where she would make her first in-story appearance. And then this one, funny enough, actually ended up getting a second print as well. So it is the same cover, but it has like a blue trade dress on it as opposed to the red one. And there is a, somewhat smaller print count overall for this book right here. And then the last thing to kind of look at is that also this book had a 1 in 75 variant edition right here, which is, actually doesn't feature Ms. Marvel on the cover, but it is an incentivized, ratio variant. So with looking at all these books, I think we can really start to figure out, okay, like where do these, numbers sit in the market and how do we sort of evaluate some of these books? So let's kind of start at that first one here, and that's going to be Captain Marvel number 17. So a book that, at the time in which it probably came out, wasn't really that sought after. Yes, it had the cameo of Ms. Marvel, but maybe no one was really specking on it in any kind of way. And if we look at the 9.8s right here, we look at the census, there's about 300 on the census, and fair market value for this one suggests it to be around the $325 range. So, okay, totally makes sense. It's the first cameo appearance of a character that is like a 2013 comic book, and the 9.8s that have 300 sit around the $325 range. And then we get to the second print right here, the second print that actually features Ms. Marvel on the cover. And let's take a look at some of the values of this one. So we look at the census here, and there's 244, and the fair market value for this book is actually 5,750. So even though the census count is somewhat similar to Captain Marvel number 17, the book's value with her on the cover is so much more expensive. Like we're talking magnitudes of 10 more expensive. Now, the book in the last 30 days has had its correction, but if we rewind the clock back to, last year, there were record high sales for this book around the $5,600 range. I think there might have been actually one even higher, which was $6,448. It's had its big correction recently, but, it currently sits, say, fair market value around the $4,000 range or so. So that's really interesting right off the bat, right? Where it's like we have this cameo appearance of the character in story, but they're not on the cover. And then when we get the second print of the character, it's not so much, it's not even that like the second print has, 3 times less copies on the census. It's just the fact that she is on the cover and that, maybe it is somewhat of a rare book because 300 really isn't that many on a census for a modern book. You can see what it does for the value. So when we get that second printing, if it features that character on the cover, that really does a lot for its values overall. But let's flash forward to, the other books here that feature Ms. Marvel, at least in terms of like her first full appearance and things like that. So we have All New Marvel Now .1. This would be Ms. Marvel's first full appearance, and she is on the cover right there. You can see her, and we kind of take a look at the census here. 9.8s, there's 334. So again, not too many overall. And the fair market value for this book is $1,800. So again, more expensive than her cameo appearance, but not as expensive as the second print, which features her on the cover. But one thing is really interesting to look at this book and compare it to the second printing of this book and see where this sits in the market. And if we look at the 9.8s here, we only see 34 9.8s on the census, and the fair market value for these suggested to be around $2,600. So we're talking 2 times the value because it is a lower print run of the book in the market. And if we look at some of the raw values for like this book, like if I were to go on eBay right now and try to buy this in the raw form, I'm probably going to have to spend around $180, $200 or so to get my hands on it. Whereas if I go to, this book right here and I look for it in the raw form, the lowest I could probably buy it for is like $380 to $400. So this is a situation where, it's a second print of the first appearance of a character, but because it is more scarce, sometimes the market does decide that we're going to charge more money for it just because it is that much more scarce. Now, I don't really know what that means in terms of like the liquidity of a book. Like who really knows? Like, are people actually paying those market prices to get the second prints because they think it is that much more exclusive? It's really hard to make a determination as far as like that is concerned. But generally speaking, the second print, because it has a lower census count and it is harder to find, does ironically command a more expensive premium. And we've seen this with other books in the market, like Moon Knight #1, a book that recently got hot because of the trailers. The second and third printings of that sometimes are more sought after overall. There's other books like First Professor Hulk that have like the second and third printings, and because they're more scarce, people sometimes value them more in the market. So when we look at a book like Ms. Minutes or Timeless #1, and we know that this book had a certain print run here, but we know that this book is going to be a 1 in 50, we can kind of make an assumption that even though it feels like we shouldn't really value the second print here for this book, this book is going to to continue to command a higher dollar amount because it is a 1 in 50 and it is more rare. It's going to have a lower census count even than that of like the low census count that already was the timeless cover with Ms. Minutes on it. Here's eBay right now. If we go to, sold items for this book, just to see what it's been selling for recently. I mean, we have a book that, sold today for $125. So a 1 in 50 selling for $120 is definitely like a pretty hot book in the market. And if I look at, Timeless One, Ms. Minutes, and let's just kind of see if we can see the first print, what, this book tends to sell for. I mean, we can see recent sales for $25, $40, etc. So it's not always that the first print is going to command the highest dollar amount. Sometimes that, manufactured scarcity or whatever the census count is going to be the thing that pushes a book to be more valued in the market over the long term. But with that said, it's not always going to be the case that there are going to be books in the market that just because they have a lower print run and they're a second print are going to command more money on the open market. And that's kind of where I want to look at a book like Star Wars #1. So Star Wars #1, The High Republic, a book that was very, very hot, in 2021, features a slew of first appearances, all the characters you see here on the cover. And one of the things about this book is that, you get exactly what you want from it with this cover right here. This is cover A. It's got the first full appearances of all the characters, and we see the characters on the cover. So this book, I think there's still a lot of value to be squeezed out of this book eventually in the market, but you can see 9.8, it's 2,300 on census, and it's a book that, let's say, sells around the $100 range, generally speaking. But then with this book also got a second printing for it, and what they did was they just took an interior page, I believe it was the last page of the book, and they just slapped it on, the cover right here. So, and this is a book situation where it was a lower print run for this book, but then again, everybody kind of was expecting it. And if we look at the values for this one, we'll see that there's 741 on the census, so half as much, and it's a book that sells for half as much, $51. So it's not that every book that has a lower print run in the second printing is going to sell for more. In fact, I actually think that in this book situation, one of the things that actually hurts the second print is that they took the characters who have their first appearances on cover A, they took them off of the second printing cover, and they used this interior page right here. So I actually think that hurt the value of this book in this particular situation. All right, let's move over to one other example that I think is really interesting to analyze. And this is really going to give us a good sense of where the first appearance of Tosin and Black Panther #3 is going to eventually shake out in the market. And there's, this book series that we can kind of analyze that actually has almost the exact a copy of what we see with what's going to happen with Black Panther 3, and that's going to be Venom #3, which of course is by Donny Cates and features the first appearance of the character Knull. Now, much like the Tosin book, this is a situation where we featured the first appearance of like a character that, people were really, really highly anticipating, but they were not featured on the cover. But not only that, there was actually a 1 in 25 for this cover as well that also didn't feature Knull on the cover, this Melina variant right here. And then later on down the line, they would eventually get to the third printing that did actually feature Knull on the cover right here. It took them one extra copy as opposed to, Black Panther 3, the second printing, we're going to be getting that Tosin cover. There was that second printing as well for Venom #3, but this one just featured this interior art page right here and didn't actually have Knull on the cover. So I think it's really interesting to look at this situation and kind of, assess where the values for this book sit in the market. So if we start with cover A right here, the first print, we look at the 9.8s, there's 3,500 on the census, fair market value for this, around the $300 range. And then if we look at the, the 1 in 25 ratio variant, we can see there's 400 on the census. So, however many that is, 5 times less. And fair market value for this book, suggested around $700. There hasn't really been too many sales recently. It's kind of dropped off to like, say, $424. But, generally speaking, when you go into eBay for this book, it typically does sell around like, say, the $500, $600 range, whereas like the Knull book in cover A sells around that $100, $200 range. So people do value the 1 in 25 more than that of cover A. And then when we go to the second print here, and we see that this is the cover right here, do people value the second print in this situation? Well, if we look at the census for this, we can see that there's definitely less, than that of cover A and the 1 in 25, 519 on the census, but this book only sells around the $120 range. And what is the reason for that? Well, this book doesn't give us any added value in terms of Knull being on the cover or some interesting factor to this book. So the market doesn't value it the same way like they do with the third print right here, which of course is this book, and it does feature Knull on the cover. So when we look at this one right here, we can see that there's actually 1,300 on the census, so more than that of the second print. But because he's featured on the cover, we can see that the fair market value for this book is $475. 30-day moving sells around the $500 range. So this is a book that, actually is almost rivaling the prices for the 1 in 25 first print without Knull on the cover. So that is definitely really interesting to think about. So then when we go back to, say, the Tosin book right here, and we look at, people anticipating this one coming out, we can maybe start to figure out like, okay, well, where does this book sit in the, value of the market, or what is like the outlook for a book like this? And we can maybe, come to some conclusion that if this book for Tosin is going to follow that of the path of Knull, we can maybe say that, hey, the 1 in 25 of the first print of this book is probably going to command the highest dollar amount, but the second printing that actually features him on the cover is going to be extremely desirable in the market, even if there is going to be a somewhat decent census count. And it's very, very possible that the cover appearance or the second print with him on the cover might even rival that of the value of the 1 in 25 variant. So it is really interesting to think about that. And it does feel like there are a lot of, variables and different factors when it comes to, say, second printings and third printings and what they offer in the market. But, to make any sort of determinations or takeaways or things like that, what we tend to see is that, ratio variants or very exclusive ratios tend to still command the highest dollar amount if it is a key book. If I look like at that all new Marvel Now .1, the 1 in 75 variant, that one is still more expensive than, say, the second print with Ms. Marvel on the cover. So from that logic, we can maybe make a determination that the timeless 1 in 50 with the black and white Miss Minutes cover is still going to hold value over the original printing. And then, after we get, past the ratio exclusivity, we look at, what does the second print or third print bring to the table? Does it bring a cover appearance of a character that wasn't previously there? And if we look at the Knull book, and it brings a character appearance on the cover, that definitely does have a factor in the value of the second printing. Whereas when we look at the Star Wars one, because it didn't bring anything new to the table, nobody really cares to own that second printing. So, exclusivity with the ratios, greater than the cover, greater than the printing of the actual book. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Let me know what you guys think. What do you guys think about second prints and third prints? I know there's a lot of people out there in the community that just don't like them at all, but if we look at how the market behaves with the values for those things, it definitely seems like, if you can add a character to a cover or if it's an exclusive ratio, people are still going to value those regardless of the fact that they are a second or third print. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. Drop me a like, comment, subscribe if you're enjoying the content, and I'll see you in the next one.